Casey said at the beginning of the panel that the Obama administration is basically down to threatening retaliation. That the Obama administration is threatening retaliation is their only response. I have to say, if only. And then just now, Mr. said, forget about retaliation, forget about retribution. Wait, no, those are good. I don't want to forget about them. I don't mean to disagree with anyone on the panel. I just mean to sort of broaden the range of options on the table. 2 years ago, the then Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Cartwright, was testifying on this issue, and he said, well, if it's okay to attack me, and I'm not going to do anything other than improve my defenses every time you do attack me, it's very difficult to come up with a deterrent strategy. Right. So then after that, people made a fuss, and I think probably Congressman Roberts was one of them, and in the 2012 Defense Authorization Act, they put in this line. Congress affirms that the Department of Defense has the capability and upon direction by the President may conduct offensive operations in cyberspace to defend our nation, allies, and interests. And that was really good. And then the Senate said, wait, no, we can't just say that. We've got to add subject to the legal regimes that the Defense Department follows for kinetic capabilities, including the law of armed conflict. So now we're having this debate. The law of armed conflict, what does it allow? Most of the time when people say the law of armed conflict, they think, oh, the Geneva Conventions. Oh, what the Red Cross says. Pretty much the Red Cross view of the law of armed conflict is it's how Switzerland would have fought the Second World War if it hadn't been fighting itself. Or they mean this treaty from the 1970s, Additional Protocol 1, which is how the Third World would like the West to fight if it is ever fighting them, which is don't hurt anyone. What people take to be the most fundamental principle, really I'm not making this up, is principle of distinction, which is when you do engage in armed conflict, you must only target military objects, and you must do nothing to hurt civilians or civilian objects, but otherwise known as like stuff. So I won't give a long presentation. I just want to remind you, if you think back, actually, unlike Switzerland, we in the United States who were fighting in the Second World War, as also in the First World War, we didn't actually fight it that way. It's in the First World War that we launched this phrase, economic warfare, which is stop anything from going in or out of their ports. And we did not think, well, that would only hurt the military. We very well understood that was squeezing the German economy. We did that deliberately. The term economic warfare arose in the First World War because this was a little more ambitious than previous blockades. It was not a totally new idea. And in fact, you see the earlier idea in the United States Constitution. It's totally forgotten. It ought to be remembered. I'm really offering this up. There's a provision in Article 1, Section 8. Congress has the power to declare war, but then it also mentions and to grant letters of marque and reprisal. And they list that as something separate. You don't need to be at war. You can just have letters of marque and reprisal. And why letters of marque and reprisal? Because they have this historic experience. It really hurts your enemy if you hit him. And if you don't have the wherewithal to actually fight his army or even his navy, you just authorize private ship owners to go out and attack the commerce of your enemy. And who were the private ship owners who they authorized to do this? Well, some of them actually were people just engaged in commerce. Some of them had previously been pirates. But the point is, we gave them a license and said, go do it and you will hurt them. And the reason why they had this very much in mind in 1787 when they drafted the Constitution, they had done this during the American Revolution. We didn't have a navy. We still wanted to hit back at Britain. John Paul Jones, hero of the Navy, was basically raiding British commerce. He was mostly not fighting British warships. He was mostly attacking British commerce, which is a way of saying to the British, do you really want to continue this? Now, let me just say two quick things and I'll be done. I'm not saying everyone ought to hit anything and everything. But we should think about this more imaginatively. It is insane to allow the Swiss to tell us how do we fight our wars, and it's doubly insane to have the Swiss tell us how to fight cyber conflict, which it isn't even a war, and it's certainly not a war which Switzerland knows anything about. And we have a whole lot of people writing things about this. I regret to say some of them are not Swiss. It was mentioned earlier, Estonia freaked out when they had these series of cyber attacks a few years ago, so then they said, oh, we got to do something about this, so they cranked up. There's a NATO Center of Excellence in Tallinn. They recruited all these NATO experts on the law of war. They were all lawyers. Some of them were very serious people. I don't need to denigrate them, but they do what lawyers do, which is, let's think of objections to doing anything. So they have produced a 200-page manual, the Homeland manual, and it takes basically the Red Cross view, which is, oh yeah, cyber weapons, yes, of course, but don't hurt anyone. Well, don't hurt any civilians. Don't hurt any civilian stuff. You shouldn't be viewing this as anything that attacks commerce. This, I think, really makes no sense. I want to mention two things. One, we still have the idea that in a real war we would use the Navy to impose blockades. That is in the US Navy Commander's Handbook. We just don't follow the Red Cross view of the law of war when it comes to naval war. Is cyber more like we go out there and hurt stuff, do stuff? Or is it more like we send tanks into enemy territory and then say to enemy civilians, oh, sorry, but that's okay. I'd say it's more like naval war. And so even what we now say about naval war should be applicable to this. And the second thing I say is we all should learn from history. Letters of marque and reprisal, if you go back before the American Revolution, the original origin of it was in earlier times. Kings said, oh, they took your stuff, sorry. We don't really know what to do about that, and sorry, medieval England doesn't actually have really much of the Navy, so you just compensate yourself. And by the way, if you can't find the person who took it, take it from someone else of the same country, and then they'll get the idea not to allow their people to do this. What a great tactic that is. We should be thinking about that. And I say, not anyone attacking at random, but people who come to the government and say, I have some idea who this is. We should have some procedure to authorize counterattacks. At the very least, to authorize things which would otherwise be illegal, which is hacking to find out details about exactly who did this and what were they doing. The pictures that we showed, that was all fabulous. It's a good thing those people haven't been prosecuted yet, because what they did was illegal, I believe, right? Okay.
Keep that argument.
Yeah, so we ought to have a way to authorize these things and say, you're authorized to do this kind of thing under these limits, and good luck to you, and if you enrich yourself, that's good, because people need incentives to fight and fight hard. And I mean, this date in the Constitution is worth nothing. I do want to mention that very last fact, which is a fun fact. NSA, I don't know what they're doing exactly, but Symantec, just one, computer security firm, has 10 times the annual budget of the NSA. And Symantec is a big company, but it's not the only company out there. There's vastly more resources, not just in sort of the private sector, but in the private cybersecurity sector. There are more now security guards, people hired with actual human beings with guns and stuff, than there are public police. There ought to be many more cybersecurity activists probing, checking, investigating that there are government, because you can't rely on the government, as has been so well said by my predecessors. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to all of our panelists. We have about 5 minutes left, which is plenty of time for a couple questions. So, lady in the front, please, you have the floor.
This administration is actually conducting the drone attacks, which also is civilian. So if we take the argument, then why not cyber? Do we have to call it war in order to be able to use cyber drones to attack other people?
Someone repeat. I was just throwing pieces of this.
The government has already said that it's going to be bound by the laws of war.
So what we've done is faction the handcuffs ourselves. Do we have to? No, we don't have to. But if we're worried about opinion and liability, then what we're going to do is keep factioning the handcuffs.
Let me add one quick thing. I am in favor of having legal restraints on the conduct of war. I am not saying, oh, bah humbug, let's just go out and kill a lot of people. It's very important, I think, to observe humanitarian constraints, not only for the way this looks to the rest of the world, but I think it's demoralizing to our people to be responsible for piles of dead bugs. But you're totally missing the point of cyber if you say, well, we wouldn't allow infantry platoons to shoot at civilians, therefore we shouldn't have cyber attacks on civilian objects. Wait, that makes no sense. The whole point of cyber is you can impose a lot of cost without killing anyone. So we should be thinking about ways that we can get their attention, punish them, retaliate, but without killing people. That's wonderful. To think of this as if the main thing is not to hurt any civilian objects, you're totally missing the point of cyber. It's going into the Sistine Chapel and saying, wow, the tiles on the floor, they're really beautiful. Let me get a little closer and look more closely at the floor here. Look up!
In the back, and then on the right.
We've heard a lot of variety of cyber crimes, but I wondered if there's some kind of taxonomy or codification that says this is an irritation and this is cataclysmic.
Yeah, and I think that we actually heard that from Chairman Rogers. There's ordinary criminals and hacktivists. There's well-organized criminals who come out of Eastern Europe and have quasi-governmental backing and protection. And then there are nation states who train the next generation of cyber criminals as well as doing massive damage. But that's roughly the taxonomy of attackers that we see today.
Well, that's the taxonomy of the attackers, but what he was asking about, I think, was the taxonomy of the impact. So the actual impact of the events, rather than characterization of the attack.
You know, I have...
So the vigilante will fit the crime.
Yeah.
And the problem is you can have non-state actors who can have equal effects for a fully funded state actor if they put their efforts in the right place.
So this is worth saying, particularly at this conference in response to this question. 20 years ago, people were saying, oh, we need to have universal jurisdiction to deal with people who commit extreme human rights offenses because that's so terrible. That's like piracy. Everyone used to say piracy, that's a universal offense. Anyone can go after pirates. And one of our former GMU professors here investigated this, and it turns out actually what they were concerned about with piracy was not that pirates were torturing people, not that they were abusing them, and not that they were, wearing bizarre costumes and frightening them. They were stealing. And they were really upset about the stealing. And people were convicted of piracy who had not hurt anyone but took their stuff. And therefore, it disrupted ocean commerce. I think when you have looting on a huge scale, it's silly to say, well, that's not really a provocation because it's just stealing. I mean, on a large enough scale, it has a very big impact. And I don't mean to say, oh, well, once you kill one or two people, then we won't mind, or then we'll get upset because you kill. I mean, it's worse to kill people, of course it is. But looting on a very large scale is a very serious provocation. And for us to shrug it off is basically like saying to pirates off the coast, off the Horn of Africa, as long as you don't hurt anyone, take whatever you want. That's nuts.
Yes, sir.
I think we're...
Actually, I'll give it to you next, sir. This gentleman here was ahead of you.
I'm Charlie with King County Law Group in Western Texas. I want to thank you, Mr. Rabkin, about your idea of letters of marque. I always wondered why we didn't have privateers in this sector go forth and take your booty and strike. I have a colleague at a technology company locally who their company's been getting a lot of strikes, not only from some of the actors that we noted here at PRC, but also from some of our supposed allies, France and Israel. And they're frankly are wits in. They're maybe a potential client of mine. And I've been counseling them not to counterattack, but they're about ready to counterattack. Now, what do you guys propose? Because they're actually finding there's, I got to protect my own territory here.
You know, Microsoft last year went to court and they got a federal district judge to issue them, okay, go take down this botnet that you think is responsible for all this, and they did it. I think it's kind of difficult to say case by case, let's have a federal district judge decide this. So what I think would be perfectly sensible is something like these national security letters that the Justice Department gives to, you know, Verizon or something, say, give us the data, you won't get in trouble, we promise, here's authorization.
But are we talking years before this happens, and this is happening now?
Oh, no, we gotta do this right away. I mean, and the whole point of making it administrative is so that it could be done quickly. Right? They basically said, could you give this to us, and you can turn it around quickly.
Okay, could. Now, will it? That's the question, right?
So there are legal arguments. They're not perfectly strong if you're conservative, but that suggest that you can do more in defending and seeking to obtain back your own information. That's different from just sending people, you know, exploding malware that will cause harm in their network. And I'm not sure I would recommend that because I think you'll just piss people off and it won't actually do much. But the idea of gathering information on the people who are attacking you is enormously effective potentially. And the idea of doing that, it would be something that I would strongly recommend. You can get a lot of help from government agencies in pursuing and prosecuting people who have stolen information.
Why only?
I think we have time for 2 more questions. So, Stuart, do you want to finish that thought?
No, I'll stop them.
Okay. We're over, but there are a couple of hands up, so I think we have time for 2 more. This gentleman, and then, sir, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you. My short-term vision is off. Director?
You issue a letter of marque and reprisal while leading from behind.
Okay, the answer is
I'll leave that
on a rhetorical question.
Just one
Sir.
question, because we talked about asymmetric war here, and that's really what we're on, whether it's economic, whether it's military, whatever it is. Should we not be looking at what the armed forces role is, what the economic role should be? Should we not be looking to define a new way of how we're going to go to war? In other words, a new offensive that we're going to have. It's not going to be with putting naval ships necessarily in the South China Sea, U.S. naval ships. I'm talking about new rules for warfare, using cyber warfare, and the whole gambit of what we're looking at here, not just firing bullets.
And let's hear from our second questioner as well, and throw that open to the panel, please. Yes.
I commend the initiative and I'm very happy to know Joe and to discuss this because I believe that it looks like really a new world, and the job that all the governments of America started from the bad immigration policy of the Indians to accelerate it again. The tribalism were kind of cyber Indians here between the Indian tribes that couldn't organize themselves. It took a couple of centuries until we had the fathers of the Republic to make the proper balances between the institutions and what is vigilantism and what is the legal order, and after that we have the international cooperation. What we have here is the beginning of this war on this. Certainly we're a little bit better than the local Indians because we created, America created the cyberspace. It has a lot of knowledge, much more than anybody else on the planet. And we have the responsibility to organize the immigration policy in the world in a way to have a proper legal order that benefits American benefits the world. So I really commend this initiative, but that's why it is so interesting because you get Hamilton, the trade, the commerce, you get Jefferson, more traditional approach, and this is a long way that we're starting now. And I'm very happy.
Thank you. Ask our panelists for any reaction to those questions.
Actually,
Actually, let me pick the last one on how we're pulling these together. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is a failure to monetize this issue. So we're in an area that a lot of people have criminal liability. That, I think, is a problem. Right? We've got to decriminalize a lot of the activities that the private sector do, but include a regime that would have civil responsibility. And in British rule, this does get back to how you engage your private sector in a meaningful way that allows for insurance, the insurance industry bonding civil liability to make sure that people aren't acting irresponsibly and doing it with the government. And the way, for citizens arrest, I think, for an example, the rule that came over from England was that in England, if a law enforcement officer arrested someone incorrectly, they could neither be criminally nor civilly prosecuted for that or sued. But if a civilian went ahead and arrested someone, did a citizen's arrest and got it wrong, they wouldn't be criminally responsible for that as long as it's good faith. But they might be sued if they caused any damage to that person. And those type of models, I think, are really where the economists, the technologists, the policymakers need to join forces. How to ensure that this is not a free-for-all, that there is rule of law, that there are proper handoffs, that it stabilizes rather than it accentuates or exacerbates these situations, and that civil liability and market insurance and monetization help make sure that there's accountability if things go wrong. I think that's possible. I think that we are far away from aligning these strategies together, but that's really where the results can come.
A brief comment. I gave a version of my talk. It was somewhat longer, a little bit more scholarly at Columbia also. And someone raised his hand and said in what I thought sounded like Indian accent, have you thought about cyber gorillas? Damn, I of course thought about that. I just thought I was trying to be scholarly. So he came down and talked to me first. He worked for the Indian Ministry of Defense. They're thinking very hard about how to respond to hacking from China. I think we have a lot of potential allies around the world who are thinking about very similar concerns because they are, of course, also victimized. And we shouldn't be at all, think like, if we don't get a treaty right away, then it's hopeless, or we're just out there on our own. We have a lot of people who are interested in rethinking these things, and in some of them in surprising places. Not Switzerland. India is a big country, a lot of smart people.
Please join me in thanking the panel.